Pat Eshghy, Oldham versus Icelander. So it's
actually it changed it up a little bit. It looks like it isn't FAB.
Yeah, that's
instead
my
it's
bad.
going to be
Brian Lorenz on Icelander. So again,
everything is different.
Yeah, we are, as you say, human beings. We're gonna make we're gonna make mistakes. And this happens. It's all good. Listen, 50% of this matchup we got correct, which was the Pat Eshghy part. And frankly, let's be real, if you're batting 500, not only are you in the Hall of Fame, my friend, you have a monument built to your likeness.
You know, sometimes we fail, sometimes we drop off, but you know, we can always make a trade.
We can.
And right now, we're going to trade out that 5 for an Icelander, and we're going to see how this Icelander tackles all of the perhaps dangerous threats that could be lurking from Oldham.
Yeah, both of these heroes do like to lean on their blues, and what I really like about this matchup here is that the Oldham is going to lean on Sledge. Sledge value is going to be very important. You have the 3 Null Rune options here, the gloves, the boots, you do have the Heart of Ice, and in case, should you want to make this happen, hey, why not? Let's just go with a Crown of Seeds as well. Now, we're opening up here with one of those setup cards like the Energy Potion and following up with a Waning Moon for 2. Easy block just with all the Null Rune there. You pitch and you're good. So a little bit of spring cleaning for Pat Eshghy's hand by being able to filter out a card he doesn't like there.
That's right. Playing as Icelander going first, feeling the wonderful power of being able to Arsenal first, but in this instance, it's not going to actually come through and mean much because 64, no, it's just 10. 10 damage from Glacial Footsteps coming across. I don't believe that we saw a fuse, but it's very possible that I just missed it. Either way, 10 damage is a huge number early in the game, and being able to draw into that red along with the blues necessary to pitch for it, fantastic.
Honestly, I don't even think you really care about fusing these things until late game, where because in all honesty, these are the fat attacks that Brian's going to have to deal with. And, you can see that there it goes. So the life total is dwindling already for the Icelander, which starts at a deficit. They start at 36. So I think the whole point here is you have to sort of take your licks early in order to go ahead and make the setup. So
yes,
the permanents on the board, like the Ice Hex, like the E-Pot, things like that, you're going to be punished early, but eventually it pays off.
Yeah, so one of the game plans that you can take as the Icelander player in this matchup is being very judicious with damage that you take early, but taking damage when you have to establish one of these very powerful disruptive effects, Frost Hex, the Insidious Chills, Amulets of Ice to a lesser degree, but you still set them up, because you set up a turn where you disrupt an entire hand's worth of cards, or as much as you can, and really go crazy with Frost Hexes. And then from that point, you just take the tempo the entire way home.
So as it stands, there's another big attack. That's a Macho Grande, and we got 2 float. That's going to be a 8 Dominate. So only 1 card from hand can be used to block this. There are other outlets here. You have the Ironhide Gloves, if necessary, if you want to block with. If that's a defense reaction in Arsenal, you can use that as well. Looking at the list here.
So actually, that Arsenal card, I believe, was a Sigil of Solace that he drew into alongside of the other Sigil of Solace he played. And so he has a red Sigil of Solace in Arsenal, which can play well if your opponent does something like, I don't know, Command and Conquer, try to threaten a pummel, and then you just come across with Sigil of Solace and show that that Command and Conquer was perhaps not the right play. But here, Dominate doing some serious work.
Dominate's a great way to sort of guarantee or at least get some equipment out of a particular hero. But in this case, I don't think it matters. Icelander is completely content taking vanilla damage with no on-hits. What Icelander is going to be more concerned about are cards that peel cards away out of the hand. Cards like Fused Oakenolds and, just being aware that there's 3 red pummels floating around.
Yes, and it is also something you do have to worry about as Icelander. You started at a deficit. You start at 36. And if your opponent does find just Dominate attack into Dominate attack into Dominate attack, you can actually fall very far back in life totals. Now, sometimes you choose to do that as Icelander so that you can gain your own tempo. But when it's Dominate attack after Dominate attack, you can oftentimes, in that scenario, just fall too far. And so you don't necessarily want to see all of these Dominate attacks back to back. You do want to be able to block a little bit from hand and try to mitigate some damage.
All right, that is a Chilling Ice Vein, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's Aether Ice Vein.
Aether Ice Vein. Sorry, I'm sorry. Aether Ice Vein that is going to be fused as well. Now, if this does connect for damage, there is some bad news associated with that.
Yeah. So here, fusing this is representing 3 damage, asking him to either Crown of Seeds or just AB3 here, Arcane Barrier 3 to stop the damage. Because if you don't, you're going to have to discard a card or pay 2. But we do see the Crown of Seeds activation floating 2 as well, which is going to likely just go to stopping this Aether Ice Vein completely. And then we're going to probably see this play. If that is indeed a Sigil of Solace, which I believe it is, he's probably going to flash that out so that he can establish a Frost Hex. And it is indeed, that is exactly what he's going to do, because then you can drop the Frost Hex into the arsenal.
And that's an important place for that. Again, the blue cards, especially with Ice, in conjunction with the Icelander ability, that might stop a turn. Now, in reality, it's not like this. The Oldhim is going to be really relying on a lot of go-agains. Are they in there? You know, looking, there's 3 Zealous Beltings. There's 2 Rouse the Ancients. I don't see any E-Strikes, but it is a possibility that maybe that 1 extra Ice may ruin things. Now, this is just an Oakenold unfused.
That's correct. This is just vanilla damage, but he is holding 2 cards in hand, representing no resources right now, but this does smell of a possible pummel play. And so from the perspective of Icelander, when you're presented with pummel plays, you have a lot of decisions to make, whether or not you want to overblock, whether or not you can actually just accept the pummel, toss a card, who cares? That's the question you ask every single time, and it is a pummel play.
Bingo. So there's the pummel. Now, you can react to this by perhaps pitching some cards that are necessary. For instance, all right, so in response to that, hey, I'll give you an Ice Hex, no problem, and maybe pitch another little bit here to go for the Waning Moon, because that card in hand right now, that is just completely gone. So make use of it while you can. That's the beauty of playing Wizard. Instant speed is where you want to be.
It really is, and being able to make this type of play, or know that you can make this play, and then actually do it, is huge if you want to play as Icelander into the current build of Oldhim, which is very mid-range and threatening a disruption itself.
So talk us through here a little bit. You're very proficient with Wizard, obviously. Icelander is one of your new favorite heroes, if I'm not mistaken. Now, what is the game plan here for the Icelander? How do they win? I know it revolves around Ice Hex, but for those who are uninitiated on the hero, what is the strategy here for Icelander?
So there's a couple of ways to attack this matchup, and some more successful than others, depending on how the deck that you're playing against is built and what they draw into. But the general game plan that you can play towards is establishing Frost Hexes, which we see 2 of them out of the 3 in the deck are on the board, establishing a board full of other permanents like the Amulet of Ice in hand and the Insidious Chill that he finds in hand as well, getting those on the board, and then asking your opponent to extend a little bit until the point where you can play, either on their turn or on your own turn, a disruptive fuse target, something like an Aether Ice Vein, where you fuse it and it triggers this Insidious Chill we see on the screen here, which says whenever you Ice Fuse, you take a counter off of it, and then they have to discard or pay 2. Basically, you just start ripping cards from their hand on your turn or on your opponent's turn by doing it, you know, like a blue Aether Ice Vein from Arsenal, and doing the same exact thing, ripping cards, or something like an Ice Eternal, which is the Icelander specialization, and then just stacking up a bunch of Frostbites. Doing this play essentially just gives your opponent a bunch of Frostbites, which, because of Frost Hex, all threaten arcane damage. And so your goal is to steal a hand, win a turn cycle, and then just keep doing that until you kill them. And until you get them to a point where they're low enough that any arcane damage combination of, like, you know, a red Aether Ice Vein plus the Waning Moon or something to that effect is just death. And then they overextend and you kill them with the Storm Striders.
Simple.
You know,
or you could swing a gigantic hammer at the person and just be like, "Hey, cool! Here's four resources. Just suck on this." I mean, you just went through this entire, like, okay, so you started this off like, okay, go steal the Declaration of Independence.
That's right.
That's how you began this whole thing.
That's correct.
Oldham's like, cool story, bro. Pummel you, dude.
Yeah,
like,
cool story, bro. Here's 10 dominate.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yes,
I just want to make sure that I understand this, that you need like a PhD in accounting to do this with Icelander, whereas Oldham is just going to smash you to bits.
You know, he's elderly. He's advanced in age. He's done with all the disruption and the tricks. He's like, okay, I'm just going to hit you until you die.
Like
the
young version of the hero, right? The Blitz version of the hero, he's all like, he looks like he's like in the wind. Like it looks like he's, you know, going through.
He's in battle.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And now he's like, yes, screw that. He's like, get off my lawn, dude. Like that's
quintessential Oldhim. Look at this guy, this old man.
All right, so here's what you're talking about. Those frostbites, again, with the double frost hexes, those can be nasty. And if you do not have a way to plow through those, and I mean, the Heart of Ice is a good way that when you do have the frostbites on the board, you could pitch away, activate your crown, your Heart of Ice, and that should burn through some of those frostbites.
So the other way that you can play around this is like Crown of Seeds and pitch a bunch into Crown of Seeds as well. But the setup that you play for as Icelander taxes the opponent so much that they generally just can't crack the frostbites. Like that's generally the play, is to establish so many frostbites that they can't pay extra to actually remove them, and then they threaten a bunch of damage. Because if you have a frost hex on board, each frostbite threatens 1. If you have 2 frostbites, or it's 2 frost hexes on board, each frostbite threatens 2 damage apiece. And then, of course, establishing the full combo threatens 3 damage for every frostbite you make.
And meanwhile, again, the Oldhim plan is just like, hey, what is the fattest thing I can throw at you? And it looks like a Spinal Crush in this case. Pitching, unfortunately, not necessarily the best way. A lot of reds in the hand over here. But again, we're just going to stuff this right now. That looks like a 3-block with a sink below to soak up 7 of the 9. Which is going to bleed 2 through, if I'm not mistaken, bringing Brian down to 24. Now, Pat Eshghy's at 35, and I've played this matchup many times before, and it was the first time that I thought I was in a safe spot at like 20, 21, or 20 health, where they finally did what you explained, which was gum up your hand, steal it, peel it away from you, and then hit you with like 7 frostbites, and you can't even pay through it. There's nothing you can do, and you just watch as your life total just shoots down to 0.
That's right. And generally you're wanting to do that at a point where you can also follow that up from the Icelander's perspective with even more damage perhaps on their turn. So if you can steal their cards on your turn, then you have a free basically refill. But here, this is another great way to attack Icelander, is by going wide. And yes, Icelander does have the ability to maybe disrupt on a turn where you go wide, but threatening the Zealous Belting also threatens a pummel in hand, but it could also just mean that you're just going to pitch a few more cards and come in with a sledge after the fact.
So 5 go again is what's being presented now to Brian Lorenz on Icelander. The first thing is, hey, well, we're going to pitch an Amulet of Ice to float. Oasis Respite is going to soak 4 of the 5. The 1 life gain gets negated by the damage that goes through. So it's all even Steven still at 24 for Brian. But there's another action, and that's going to be the Sledge of Anvilheim. And that is a big boy. That's 6 the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, we don't see a ton of Sledge being played by Oldhim. At least I haven't seen a ton of Sledge being played. Generally, you know, the play is for the 4 attack hammer, the Winter's Wail. No, the Whale, the which one? Winter's Wail. It was Winter's Wail. What was I thinking?
I was going to let you get there on your own.
Okay, cool. Well, you know, the wheels turning, the hamster got there eventually.
I was like this close to calling an Uber for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. But generally, we see Winter's Wail as the side here. But being able to threaten 6 damage is nothing to scoff at.
I would never scoff, and like the reason why is because I also don't know what scoffing is.
Well, you know, you can look that up.
I will look it up, and I mean, if you're not going to scoff, Armada, I mean, in this case like this, again, soaking, you know, blocking 6 damage and being able to poke with Winter's Wail here, you could see Pat eventually is getting whittled down a little bit.
Yeah, as his turn begins, he passes. I believe he passes his turn here, holding a full grip and drawing up, of course, with that full grip. Oh, I see. So we have the activation here off of, or onto the Heart of Ice, saying, do you want to respond to this beforehand? And, you know, I just picture like this little squirrel just like running through all the different options, like an accounting, like it's wearing the little visor, punching all the things in the brain, just going, okay, what are our options? Punch, punch, punch really fast, just like going a little squirrel claws, trying to figure out what in the world to do, and then finally coming up with the answer here. And maybe it's something crazy, Or maybe it's something as easy as, I just don't respond.
You've basically described like this rodent bookie. Like he's got his little, his visor, the cigar hanging out of his mouth, saying, all right, what do you got? You want 5 stacks on the Giants? And he just like crunches all the numbers, no problem. I don't know why it's a squirrel, though. Maybe it's because it's the word we pulled out of the hat.
It could be the word that I pulled out of the hat. Either way, this is a really solid block here, preventing the damage. Having to overpay because of the channel Lake Frigid, which was established, he's going to channel a card down.
How detrimental is Channel Lake Frigid against a hero like Iyslander?
Well, it's interesting because if Iyslander were playing in any other sort of matchup where the opponent's not threatening a billion damage every turn and like also pummel to rip cards, and you're just like, I just need to survive, so I'm going to throw cards at you, it would be bad. But in this scenario, you're already blocking with your cards anyway, so you're most likely not super overpaying unless you want to really establish another piece of the puzzle. And it looks like just content to arsenal and pass and force the Oldham player to either pitch 2 ice cards or say goodbye to that card that didn't really do much.
The Oldham player now is going to go ahead and Crown of Seeds here to float. We're going to cycle a card around, block, damage. Again, this is on the Oldham's turn, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, but we'll find out if he clears here. But the Iyslander player did draw up. Brian drew up,
right.
So assuming that is.
Let's throw it down. Another 10 spot. That is Glacial Footsteps, red 10. And again, the beautiful part about this matchup for the Oldham, jamming these big attacks is a lot of the times you're slamming that attack down, and the Iyslander is going to do her theatrics. There's going to be a lot of song and dance and activations and triggers and this and that, but at the end of the day, there's still a bill for 10 damage that she's accountable for. And, when you have a fairly decent lead in life. Now, this is only 7. That can vanish in a heartbeat. But Pat Eshghy here ultimately is saying, I've set in 10 at you, and whatever you do to me is probably not going to be as bad as this Glacial Footsteps.
Now, this is a really interesting decision. If more is added to this block, or if you respond or anything like that, because both cards, and he's going to give him a 3rd Frost Hex, so he has over-pitched to give him the 3rd Frost Hex, but look at what he had to pitch. And this is why it was a tough decision. He's going to give him the Frostbite, but he had to pitch the Ice Eternal, which is a great card to finish the combo, and an Insidious Chill, which is a fantastic piece to establish and rip more cards out of the hand. So in this whole process, he had to actually give up 2 of the combo pieces to establish the 3rd. And a pummel comes across. Of course, the effect is not actually going to matter, but the fact that he just pummeled a Glacial Footsteps, that's a lot of resources, and that's a lot of damage.
But look at the reckoning that might be coming down. You're like, oh, hey, clean up the board. No, those are all permanents. Those are all permanents. 3 Frost Hexes, an Amulet of Ice, Insidious Chill, 2 E-Pots, a Channel Lake Frigid, and a beautiful extended art Frostbite.
That Frostbite actually threatens, or it presents 3 damage and deals 3 damage. So the single playing of an ice card, actually, I believe it's going to stop 1 of those 3 damage because Crown of Seeds was used at the start of the turn, so he would only take 2. But even just creating a single Frostbite is going to threaten 2 damage, or really 3 damage, at any given moment now.
Getting the damage, soak off of Crown of Seeds on your own turn. Typically, if you're Crown of Seedsing on your own turn, against most of the heroes, you're just wasting that. In this case, yeah, Icelander's going to do damage to you on your turn, so you are going to see a little bit of help there. As you can see, Pat Eshghy going down to 30. Brian Lorenz on 16 health. It is the 7th round of the day 1 of the U.S. National Championships here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Flake alongside Armada having a great time.
This has been a great day. It's been a great day of games. It has been every match that I've gotten to watch alongside you has been fantastic.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I have so much agency in that. It's incredible. We're going to start off here pitching through. That's a Disable. Disable's just 7. And Disable against an Iyslander typically feels a little bit like a wasted space card because Disable attacks the Arsenal. And in this case, even if there was an Arsenal, Iyslander is most likely going to just go ahead and rip it out of there and fire it off before Disable takes effect.
And 7 is one of those big damage-dealing numbers in Flesh and Blood in general. It's over that 6 breakpoint that 2 cards can fully, cleanly block. But here, we do know that Brian has a Sink Below in the hand, along with one of those other 3-card blocks. He could do something like block for 3, block for 4 to block it all out, arsenal that Insidious Chill perhaps so that he can establish it, and maybe set up for a huge steal turn coming up soon. He's going to block with the Aether Ice Vein. Probably going to follow this up with the Sink Below there. Could choose to sink.
Yeah, you're going to have to pay for that, though. The Heart of Ice is going to tax that by 1.
It will.
Heart of Ice putting in a lot of work here.
Yeah. Heart of Ice has done, I mean, choosing to activate Heart of Ice is really the key. And knowing when to bring this in and when to activate it when you have the resources to cover it is hugely important. Now, this is a very smart thing. It's something I did a few turns ago. What Brian's doing right now is he's counting threat density. He looked at what threats have been played, and I was doing this a moment ago. We have seen 1 Command and Conquer, if I remember correctly, 2 red Glacial Footsteps, a single Oaken Old. That was, I believe, did we see a second pummel or at least 1 pummel? And there's a Spinal Crush you can now account for on the bottom of the deck. With that, we also know that there's a Zealous Belting that's been played. So we're starting to get to the point where a lot of these red power cards are getting used. And if that's the case, maybe you can continue to weather the storm. You're at 16. That's not great. But you can start weathering the storm and maybe pivoting the tempo if you can maybe steal some cards from hand. The
good news for Brian is that he found all 3 Ice Hexes, right? And that's a very big part of this is a lot of the times you're just out there hunting for it. Oh, there's a Fused Oaken.
Ooh, okay, so this is huge. This is something that you definitely don't want to see across the table from you as Brian in this exact position because you have the pieces you want to establish. You've got another Amulet. You've got the Ice Eternal that you could play and really tax your opponent for. And all of a sudden, all of that is just going to crumble away.
9 Dominate. No Go Again. Those days are over, by the way.
No Go Again, thankfully.
I'm just going to go ahead and maybe... We're gonna just take a look here at this Oaken Old as we do some side googling, because I just pulled a name out of the hat and I have no clue what the hell this means. So we're gonna figure this out all together now.
You can do it, Flake. We believe in you. You've pulled a word from the hat. Now you have to use it while commentating. It's a tough one. Can you? So he's gonna establish. I can use it right now. Would you like me to?
Oh, no, you can't.
No, go ahead. Oh, I thought you were doing it.
All right, so there we go. So we're going to just go ahead and we're going to block this out here, play the other Insidious Chill, which is frankly just a facsimile of the other one that's on the board. Got him! Absolutely got him!
Nailed the facsimile. I was hoping you were going to do that.
And the crowd goes wild.
You finished strong.
Can you guys cut to me for just a second as I celebrate on this one? We got there.
We're all so proud
We got there. All right.
Facsimile was the word. Okay. Now, this is tough. This is still a tough spot because he isn't blocking out on this Dominate attack. He's blocking what he can, but he knows that the cards in hand are going to just disappear. Okay. They're going to be gone crazy. They're done. So pitching instead of getting rid of them so that you can activate the gauntlet and then sending a single card block like you can because it's dominated is all you really can hope for.
So, Brian, in this case, again, it's when you're talking about threat density and examining your opponent's graveyard, seeing what's going on, if you've got a mind about it, you know more or less what is still accounted for. You do this kind of math. You know, you do it for many different heroes. You do it for Lexi. You're like, okay, how many 3-of-a-kinds, Art of Wars, Rain Razors have been played, and you go from there. In this case, maybe Oaken Olds are what you're taking into account.
Pummels. You're looking at pummel numbers as well.
Pummels are another big one. You know, the sort of the vanilla threats like the Glacial Footsteps, the Macho Grandes or whatever. On hits are what are going to matter. Dominate as well. Whatever, you know, nerfs your turn or ruins your day. In this case, pitching the Terra Sunder, activating the Heart of Ice here. How comfortable are you, if you're Brian right here, how confident are you that you can still pull this off? It looks to me like he's got the entire you know, the entire aura build right on the board. It looks like Prism of Days Old.
Yeah, this is the setup that you want, and now at this point you're just looking for something to fuse, okay? And like a freezing point, for example, which we do see in hand here, but he chose not to respond to the Heart of Ice. And if he would have done something like Storm Strider's freezing point, if you have the resources for it and the fuse target for it, which it looks like he does technically have, might have been an interesting play to try and stop, you know, all of what we're seeing right now, which is, I believe, is that a, what is that attack? Thunderquake. It's a Thunderquake red representing 46 damage. No, 10 damage.
No,
right, 10
again,
damage.
keep in mind, inflation, recession, all that stuff, yeah. It's actually 10 ultimately at the end of the day, but still, some of that creeps through. Brian now at 10. Again, he's been on the back foot a lot of this, but the most important part is that he's basically set the table. He's just waiting for the dinner bell to ring here because everything is where it should be, it seems.
Yeah, and he's going to choose most likely to arsenal this card. Of course, you have to give your opportunities to your opponent to maybe activate an instant like a Crown of Seeds, but there's a pass here and a draw up. So we do have an arsenaled card. One of those 4 cards, perhaps the Freezing Point red, because it was a fuse card that you could, you know, Storm Striders out and then fuse. Perhaps that is the card in Arsenal. I didn't quite make out what else, you know, was basically blocked with on that previous turn. But that is one way that you can find your way back into this game.
That is a Cranial Crush. That's another 8 attack. On Crush effect here should be that, hey, you're not drawing cards.
And there's the possibility, there's the slim chance that Pummel is an Arsenal, and so if you want to try and respect that Pummel and avoid, you know, losing all the cards in hand, then you could try to do a 3-card block like here. The other option there was maybe like a 2-card block, take 2, and then go to your turn and try to hit the fuse target on your turn.
Is Pat content in this juncture here to just go for a, you know, trade 1 for 3? I'm going to give you 1 card, you're giving me 3. You know, is fatigue against the Icelander ever even a consideration if your 1 card is sort of peeling 2 or 3 cards away from them?
So yes and no. As the Icelander player, you can definitely fatigue in this matchup. But as the Oldham player, you don't want to give them time to build the board that he's built, that Brian's built. And he found some of those Frost Hexes early enough that the board is set. Like you said, the table is set. And it's really up to Brian to just find a moment where he can keep a card, keep a fuse, and then fuse on his own turn. Because that's really the big play that he's looking for. If he can just take a little bit of damage on a turn where, oh, well, you can't do that. Never mind. So there's always the possibility that you could, you know, stick like a Freezing Point fused or an Aether Ice Vein fused, both of which are, of course, in his hand right now. And you can say, okay, this is the moment where I take tempo and I try to really just Frost Hex you down.
Yeah, this is the gross part about it, again, is like no matter what kind of theatrics you can pull off over here, you're still facing down the barrel of a 9 attack. It doesn't matter what the crush effect or the on-hit in this case, there's going to be no go again. It's just 9 fat damage, and that is tough to swallow, especially when you start the game at 36. Now, we've seen, what, 1, maybe 2, 2 fires of the Waning Moon so far?
Yeah, the Waning Moon really doesn't come into play necessarily in this matchup, and this is the moment that he's picking. He is going to accept the damage, going down, taking 5, going down to 6, and allowing the Arsenal because he has a Freezing Point. He has an Aether Ice Vein. He's most likely going to play Aether Ice Vein fused, unless he has the resources for Freezing Point fuse, which I don't quite know if he does. But it looks like, yeah, he's representing a Freezing Point. And most likely fusing it. Pitching it was a blue Aether Ice Vein. So, yes, so this is going to count the number of Ice Afflictions. It's going to count the number of Frostbites. It's going to count the number of Frozen cards, I believe. Yes, Frozen cards that they control as well and represent that damage. But it's also going to put 2 triggers of Insidious Chill on the stack, meaning that the Oldham player has to pay 2, and then pay 2, and then deal with 8 damage, and then possibly even pay 2 again off of the Amulet of Ice.
I was going to say, is there any situation here where you might hold on to the Amulet?
It's very possible. It depends on how they pitch here, because if like Crown plus the 2 floating and then plus 2 more really just drops them into a 3-card hand, maybe you just do it again and force another card out.
Brian Lorenz, again, you know, playing a dangerous game here, holding down to 6 again and against a hero that can throw 10s at you with four on top with the pummels. Really playing it very close to the edge. And at this point, this is where that clapback occurs. This is where the reckoning, if you will. Those ice hexes have been staring down Pat Eshghy for a while now, and finally getting some use not only of the frost hexes, but also those insidious chills that have been sitting there with 3 counters waiting to pop off.
This is the first time almost all game that Pat is going to go into his turn with less than a 4-card hand, and this is why you set this up, because you're hoping that you're arsenaling a card that's you know, got some value, maybe creates a frostbite, maybe allows you to really push extra damage. So something crazy big would be arsenaling that Ice Eternal at this point. If you had that, then this would be a very close game right now. He's going to choose to Arcane Barrier 1, and then the Crown Float stops 1, and he takes 6. And this is where you can also consider the pop of the Amulet of Ice to pull another card from the hand. And I think I would probably go for it at this stage.
It's discard or pay 2, right? With the Amulet, there's only 1 fusion, so the double Insidious Chill.
Now, unfortunately, he does have, well, it's fortunate for him because it will gain him 3 life, but he does have a Sigil of Solace in hand. You would love for that to be, you know, something like a fuse target that you could arsenal and then play like a blue Aether Ice Vein. But unfortunately, he did have to pitch the blue Aether Ice Vein. That would be the perfect card to go into the arsenal in order to just make this play.
Thinking about it over here, again, playing Iyslander is no easy feat. You're playing oftentimes on the wrong side of the fence, as it were. And Pat Eshghy has done a lot of damage to this Iyslander. The Iyslander has also gained, I think, 6 life this round again. This is, how many games have we seen today where that player, if not for the life gain, had already, you know, crossed the road, as it were?
Yeah. Poised to gain 3 more life here if he chooses to. The question becomes, you know, is that 3 life here worth the possible pitch for, you know, something following this up? Maybe you want to consider, you know, trying to put something together for, I don't think you ever consider the Waning Moon here, but maybe that's what he's thinking through. Could also consider popping an energy potion for the Waning Moon, but really those energy potions are saved for Ice Eternal and just double paying or paying a ton into it.
If you pop the energy potion and swing with the Waning Moon, what is that really accomplishing? I feel like you could, if Pat Eshghy here just pitches a blue to stop it, you can just end your turn with an arsenal and be happy about it.
Well, actually, that's, I mean, yes, if it represents 2 damage is what it does. And I don't think you really consider it because 2 damage is not as good as, you know, arsenaling or having an energy potion in play, right? And here he does arsenal the ice card, which he can then play for the value of 1 frostbite. Doesn't have any effect necessarily outside of drawing a card on his turn, but it could draw him into something like a fuse target that you could Stormstriders in and then represent a bunch of damage.
Yeah, Stormstriders has, I think, been the elephant in the room in this case, where you're able to respond out of hand. With something really nasty to maybe drive the point home and just crush your opponent.
Oh, wow. And look, he had a red pummel in hand, which means his 3-card hand was essentially nerfed by the fact that it couldn't necessarily pitch cleanly. And there he is going to respond and create a frostbite. It is going to cycle a card for him, I believe.
That's the Cold Snap from Arsenal, which allows you to go ahead and draw a card off of that. Cost 1. The ice effect from Iyslander is going to also go ahead and create the Frostbite. Something to pay through if necessary.
He is going to pay the Waning Moon Arcane Barrier that he does have to stop the Waning Moon damage that was presented, but he still has a Frostbite, and that Frostbite is going to represent 3 damage anyway. So there's a double block there with an Aether Hail, fantastic card, honestly, to have. But look at the tempo of the match. All of a sudden, on a very weak turn from Pat, now Brian is playing with a few cards that he can actually, you know, maybe arsenal and find extra turns to really drive the point home. And here he's going to ask the Oldham opponent to Coronet Peak, either pay 1 or discard a card. And he's digging, he's just at this point digging for one of those Ice Eternals that he pitched earlier.
There's another big attack. I believe that's 8, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's a blue Glacial Footsteps. No No dominate, not necessary though, I think in this case.
And he's completely face up too. Like he has no cards in hand, no resources that he can pitch in to stop any frostbites. So this could actually represent a few points of damage if he chooses to play a card from Arsenal. But here he's just going to cover it up. Again, digging and just playing for that moment where he can basically blow the entire board up.
Now, in that case, if Brian actually had a hand that could create a plethora of frostbites, Pat was DOA.
Yes, that is the moment that you really are worried about. And he's not able to Arsenal card either. And in doing so, you can't do things like Crown of Seeds and represent 4 damage prevention. He's gonna again pitch a card, Coronet Peak, and he's got a 3-card hand. So again, this is basically turning off the ability to do things like pummel, unless you pummel exactly Sledge, which by the way is casual lethal if you pummel Sledge.
Cash Leaf, baby.
This is good. Responding to the representation and the attack here with the Winter's Bite from the Arsenal means that you now don't have the ability to pummel this at all. And you can't respond with pummel because this is not past the blocks portion. So this is exactly when you play this as Icelander, is in response to the card or to the attack being made.
Right, before you get to the blocking phases. Yep. Beautiful. And 6 attacks still being presented. We're just going to probably just stuff that out as well.
I believe this does leave him taking 1 because the Cold Snap is a 2-block here, so he's going to drop to 8.
Where's the danger zone for the Icelander player? What health total? I mean, I know you're up against Oldham, who can toss a 10 at you with a 4-point chaser off of it, but like, let's get real here. Is 8 safe if you're, to maybe give up 2 cards, or are you constantly having to full block now?
I don't think you're necessarily in the full block portion because what you do essentially, and this is what I do, is I look at the amount. Oh, and he's going to pay for the frostbite here so that you don't take 3 free damage. What you do is you look at the dominate amount. You like, okay, so what is my dominate cap? If I block with a single card from hand, how much damage do I take on your biggest dominate thing? So if 10 dominate, like if they're playing red Macho Grandes, if 10 dominate is what you're threatening, then I don't need to go below 6 or go to 6. But he's going to Coronet Peak here, and he has established the Ice Eternal into the Arsenal, and he's drawn a second one. But by establishing the Ice Eternal, he's got like 5 cards left in the deck over there.
I think there's like 8 or 9 cards that are left there, so that's really like 2, maybe 3 cycles left, depending on how you pitch here. Brian Lorenz needs to convert soon. The Oldham player, I don't think 16 life is by any means the kind of cushion that you want to land on.
But this is the moment where you have to play that from the Arsenal and tax them with a ton of frostbites. Because if you don't, this is also still threatening pummel, as it was previously. You want to try and get them off pummel, or you want to just full block this as literally as heavy as you can. You're in a tough spot playing against pummel here because this is the one weird like accounting thing you have to do. If you're counting dominate, that's easy. But if you're counting for pummel, that's where things get really tricky because if you just full block this with all the cards in your hand, they just don't play pummel. They just wait for the next turn.
Yeah, and at this rate, I feel like Brian has to convert at some point. We just got the word straight from Lord Xenu himself. It is actually 8 cards left in deck, so keep that in mind. At a certain point, Brian's going to have to be wary of what's going on. Popping the 2 E-Pots. This is where this is going to get nasty, folks. Walk us through this, Armada.
So this is the moment that he's choosing to go completely ham. He's losing all the resources that he's built up over time so that he can play this Ice Eternal. He's got 5. He's pitching an insane 9 into this, and he's fusing. So Ice Eternal here, and he does have to survive the turn. Keep this in mind. In order for this play to work, you have to survive the turn and have the frostbites actually kill your opponent. But representing 7 damage. This is the largest Ice Eternal I have ever seen. This is insane. And these stacks of Insidious Chill are going to rip cards from hand, stopping perhaps a pummel. And you can Amulet of Ice to completely nullify the possibility of a buff because this is all happening in response to the attack.
Okay, so the attack is not on the table yet, and we see there's a Oasis Respite on top of the stack of the Insidious Chill triggers as well. So he's pointing this directly at the
The Ice Eternal.
The Ice Eternal.
This is stopping some of that 7 damage, which is a really big play. It could be a game-saving play, depending on how he's able to go for it. But I think the Frostbites here are probably just going to explodinate him.
Okay, that's also not out of the hat.
Well, it should be, because that is a fantastic description of what's about to happen, because 7 Frostbites literally represents 21 damage at this point on the board. No matter what happens, that is, as they say, inevitable.
Now, I'm curious about this. Let's say you've got 2 floating, and Insidious Chill says discard or pay 2. Can you choose to discard even though you have no cards in hand and keep the 2 float?
You can make the choice to discard nothing, yes.
Fascinating. It feels like that's like a Bernie Madoff level of like some, financial
and
BS.
There it is. He's going to block for 3. He's going to take 3 from the sledge. And then at the end of the turn, he's going to say, how do you want to deal with these 7 Frostbites? And the answer is, well, I guess I'm